Closing rallies are about to take place in Guyana ahead of Monday's general election. 2 cases of the coronavirus confirmed in Mexico, while 2 more patients in the capital are waiting for confirmation for positive tests. And good news from Barbados as the Prime Minister announces a suspected case of COVID-19 on a cruise ship tested negative. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo in Quito, Ecuador. We begin in Guyana. Political parties in Guyana are preparing for their final rallies ahead of general elections on Monday. But on Thursday night, the main contenders made a last-ditch effort to secure votes.
But untrustworthy, totally dishonest. That is Granger for you. Granger only talks about these big things like decade of development, green state economy. He has no achievement to speak about, no plans for the future. Look at our manifesto by contrast, and I urge each of you to read it, because every single sector, we have very, very specific plans that we will start to implement as soon as we take office. From education to healthcare, to housing, to water, everything. So comrades, the choices are clear, but even if you need more convincing, and I'm sure that you don't need that here tonight, just look at the approach to oil and gas, how these people are so incompetent and possibly corrupt.
On the other hand, the ruling APNU plus AFC coalition held a women's rally with the president's wife seeking to secure the female vote.
I want a man with a slow government is a government that loves and respects women. It treats us with a genuine lover's touch. David Granger promised to help women, lift women and their families out of poverty, and he's doing that. David Granger believes in the equality of women, and that's why he's put women in the vanguard of this government's efforts to secure a good life for all Guyanese, with a little help from Minister Jordan. And that is why, as Kamal and Balder previously said, we have 11 women ministers of government. And look where we are now, less than after 5 years.
These elections in Guyana come at the end of a long political crisis, which began with a vote of no confidence in the government back in 2018. And behind the crisis is the issue of oil.
It was back in 1999 that Guyana's government dished out concessions to explore for oil to the US oil giant ExxonMobil. After David Granger came to power in 2015, ExxonMobil stepped up its exploration in waters off the Essequibo, a region that's in dispute with Venezuela. Granger says the deal with the US company will bring big benefits to Guyana. But others aren't so sure. The group Global Witness estimates that Guyana is losing $55 billion as a result of the terms of its agreement with ExxonMobil, which clearly benefit the US oil company more than the country. It was in this situation that the opposition leader Bharat Jagdeo in December 2018 presented before the Guyanese parliament a motion of no confidence in the government of David Granger. He accused them of misusing the oil revenue. Members of parliament from the opposition People's Progressive Party, or PPP, naturally voted for the motion, while members of the governing coalition opposed it, except that one lawmaker from the ruling coalition, Chirandas Persad, voted with the opposition. That gave them the 33 votes they needed to pass the motion of no confidence in Granger's government. A long and messy political and legal dispute ensued. Finally, on the 25th of September last year, Granger finally announced general elections for this 2nd of March, the date he'd agreed with Guyana's Election Commission.
Mexico has reported its first 2 cases of the COVID-19 virus. The Ministry of Health confirmed the first case in Mexico City on Friday morning, while the Health Department of Sinaloa State later confirmed a second case. The local health secretary said the patient is being monitored and doing well.
He's fine, but if he needs to be treated in hospital, we already have the corresponding medical unit with the isolation room ready to prevent the virus's transmission. We are already performing specific actions such as international healthcare in airport halls and also in the ports that are in our state of Sinaloa.
Our correspondent Eduardo Martinez has more on the first case announced in Mexico City.
¿Qué tal? Un gusto saludar al auditorio de Telesur. Efectivamente, el día de hoy, como ya lo adelantó.
The government of Mexico, through the Ministry of Health, confirmed this morning the first case of coronavirus in the Mexican capital. It's a 35-year-old man who is currently being treated in isolation in the National Institute of Respiratory Diseases in Mexico City. 2 other people who had been in contact with him are also under observation at the epidemiological center in Mexico City after they showed positive on the quick tests for the coronavirus. They have now been tested again, and in the coming hours we should hear if they are confirmed to have the virus. If they are, that would mean that there are 3 cases confirmed in Mexico City. The government has insisted that there is no reason for panic, and it called for people to avoid spreading false rumors and fake news. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has said that the country's health system is prepared to fight the virus, and all measures are being taken to stop it from spreading quickly. The health minister said this morning that all the suspected cases have only mild symptoms and that there is no reason to declare a state of alert.
We thank Eduardo Martinez for that report. Nigeria's health minister has confirmed the first case of the coronavirus in the country, which is also the first confirmed case in sub-Saharan Africa. The infected person is an Italian citizen who flew in from Milan earlier this week.
The Federal Ministry of Health has confirmed a coronavirus disease case in Lagos, Nigeria, known as COVID-19. The case was confirmed on the 27th of February 2020 and is the first to be reported in Nigeria since the beginning of the outbreak in China in January 2020. It is an Italian citizen who works in Nigeria and returned from Milan, Italy to Lagos, Nigeria on the 25th of February 2020. He actually landed here in the evening of the 24th. But by the time he got into his residence, Lagos, already 25th.
Stock markets around the world have ended their worst week since the 2008 financial crisis due to fears over the spread of the coronavirus. Friday became the 7th day straight of falling share values in New York, with the S&P 500 index losing about 2%. Earlier, there were steep declines in Asia and Europe. Investors are worried that the measures to contain the COVID-19 could damage corporate profits and economic growth. Stocks on Wall Street have lost 14% since their recorded high last week. Chinese President Xi Jinping has discussed over the phone with Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel on Friday the ongoing COVID-19 epidemic and how to further promote their bilateral ties. Xi noted that after the outbreak of the coronavirus disease, Raúl Castro Ruz, first Secretary General of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Cuba, and Díaz-Canel immediately extended their sympathies to him, and the Cuban president also paid a special visit to the Chinese embassy in Cuba to express support for China. Díaz-Canel, for his its part, said Cuba highly appreciates and firmly supports China's efforts to combat the COVID-19 epidemic and thanks China for providing help and care for Cuban nationals in the country. Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley was the bearer of good news on Thursday, boarding a cruise line ship to announce that a suspected COVID-19 test came back negative. Mottley met with Bajans on board the Carnival Cruise Line's Fascination to let them know that an employee on the vessel docked at Bridgetown was cleared to disembark after the cruise ship was turned away from St. Lucia over coronavirus concerns. This comes after fears have spread across the cruise industry and ships being blocked at different ports.
So just wanted to take a minute of your time to let you know that the Barbadian health officials and the Prime Minister herself have just joined the ship and have informed us that all the test results have come back negative.
Thank you very much, Captain. I want to, first of all, welcome everyone to Barbados and to say how pleased I am to be able to welcome you with also excellent news. This has been a long 24 hours for us all. This lovely country is more than happy to entertain you for the next 24 hours. And for those who regrettably will leave tomorrow to fly back or to sail out, that Barbados is back here waiting for you to return and join us.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has announced the creation of an anti-terrorism body accompanied by a 2-year plan to guarantee the nation's security amid threats to destabilize the country.
Within the measures that I'm announcing today is the creation of a special national body against terrorism. A special national body against terrorism which takes on, with all defense capacity, with all operational capacity, the defense of the country and the dismemberment of all terrorist groups which are sent from Colombia, from the United States, or which attempt to plant discord and disturb the peace and the country's security. I now authorize the creation of this new national anti-terrorism body of Venezuela.
President Maduro said that during Juan Guaido's recent tour, a plan was devised to deliver funding to organized crime mafias who would join efforts to destabilize major Venezuelan cities and to plan attacks on police and military units.
I have also been presented with a national anti-terrorism plan which must further elaborate at the day that we install this body. A national anti-terrorist plan for the next 2 years, 2020 and 2022. I think it has been well conceived and we should carry it out with all of our capacity and maintain it as a secret. And to provide security to the country, I signed the 2020-2022 National Plan Against Terrorism.
Venezuelans commemorated the 31st anniversary of the Caracazo on Thursday. The popular rebellion on February 27th of 1989 was one of the first Latin American revolts against neoliberalism and opened the way to the Bolivarian Revolution led by Hugo Chavez.
Not forget. That is the slogan repeated every year to remember the popular uprising of the 27th and 28th of February 1989 against the neoliberal austerity measures promoted by the International Monetary Fund. It was a social explosion led by the poor against the rich.
Our people rose up and took to the streets. 31 years later, we are here to pay tribute to the same uprising of popular power, the first constituent power. It didn't have any other from back then, it didn't have any allies. It didn't have any other way to express itself, so it had to do it on the streets. at the cost of more than 3,000 dead and many others missing.
The Venezuelan blood that was shed on the streets marked the country's history for the next decade, until in 1998 that it was vindicated by the Bolivarian Revolution.
That's why during the revolutionary government we have always rejected the IMF, because it imposes neoliberal economic measures that hurt the people, the most vulnerable. We will keep fighting that neoliberalism. They keep trying to impose those measures, but this revolution rejects them.
The unilateral coercive measures that the U.S. is now applying against Venezuela aim to overturn the revolutionary process. But these marchers see the defense of the Bolivarian Revolution as the best homage to the victims of the Caracazo.
We, the youth, are fighting for what our grandparents fought for. Young people are standing up and resisting.
For us, that was a step towards the revolution. It was when the people awoke from a long sleep, and that is why we are struggling now, and why we are proud to be part of the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela.
Latin America is going through a new wave of turmoil, as other peoples try to shake off the grip of the neoliberal model. So these Venezuelans are keen to share their experience of the struggle and commitment.
Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has arrived in Qatar on an official visit. At the Doha International Airport, Rodriguez was greeted by Director of Protocol Ibrahim Yusuf Fakhro and the Venezuelan ambassador to Qatar. The visit seeks to strengthen bilateral ties and cooperation between the two countries. Rodriguez took to Twitter to say the visit follows the path of Commander Hugo Chavez, consolidated by President Nicolás Maduro. Moving on, a new poll in Colombia says 71% of the population disapproves of President Iván Duque. According to the Gallup poll, Duque's popularity has fallen. Those asked said the situation in the country was worse and that the main problems are corruption, loss of purchasing power, and lack of security. The poll, which was organized in several cities, says Senator and former President Álvaro Uribe has the second worst image among citizens, rejected by 62% of them. Prosecutors in Costa Rica have searched the home of President Carlos Alvarado, who is accused of illegal use of citizens' personal data. Fernando Francia has the details.
The search of the president's residence has to do with a body called the Presidential Data Analysis Unit, or UPAD. This was set up over a year ago, but it came to public attention this month when it published an official decree, which a number of citizens and political parties have criticized for being full of inconsistencies. They say that the private information of citizens may have been used for political analysis by the presidency. President Alvarado himself says this unit has sought information in different ministries and public institutions to help draw up effective public policies. But the critics say the use of such personal information is illegal. So that is why the prosecutors have begun this investigation, which includes the president himself. Either way, this is the first time in Costa Rica that prosecutors have raided the house of a serving president.
We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. South Africa's economic freedom fighters held what they called a People's March in defense of Eskom, the public electricity company. Demonstrators say they won't allow the state assets, which are the people's assets, to be sold to the highest bidder in an scheme of load shedding and privatization. They also say that the crisis has worsened under the current government and that the executive must be held accountable for what is happening at Eskom. Eskom uses load shedding to protect the electricity power system from a total blackout.
The fourth demand is that Eskom should fundamentally review all power purchasing agreements with independent power producers in the renewable space, because in their current form, all the renewable IPPs is designed to benefit South Africa's racist financial sector.
In the United States, Democrats will be holding the South Carolina primary on Saturday, where Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders has built a momentum. Sanders has an advantage of more than 10 points among Democratic voters, with 29% in national polls. Former Vice President Joe Biden has 18%. Former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg is in third with 16%. Senator Elizabeth Warren and former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg have an 11% support each. Candidates are preparing for next week's Super Tuesday to have a clear picture of who will compete with President Donald Trump during November's election.
When the establishment sees turnouts like this, you're making them very nervous. And when they see us winning in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, they get even more nervous. So they're trying to come up with reasons as to why people shouldn't vote for us. And one of the reasons that you see in all the papers is Bernie can't beat Trump. Well, I would suggest to those people who think Bernie can't beat Trump, take a look at the last 50 national polls. And you will find on 47 of those 50, Bernie beats Trump.
Mexico says it will demand that the Organization of American States clarify the flaws in its report of the elections in Bolivia, which led to the coup against President Evo Morales. This after a report published on Wednesday by the Washington Post concluded that claims of voter fraud by the OAS appear deeply flawed. Mexico's foreign ministry said results contradict Secretary General Luis Almagro and is asking the organization for explanations. Researchers say there's no reason to suspect there was voter fraud as claimed by the de facto government to demand that Morales resign. Also in Bolivia, indigenous women's leader Felipa Huanca was arrested for supposedly trying to flee the country. She denounced persecution against women's leaders. Let's have a look.
Felipa Huanca was a leader of the Campesino women in La Paz. She's currently part of the Bolivarian National Confederation of Indigenous Women, Bartolina Sisa, that declared itself in an emergency to demand her freedom.
They want to humiliate us. They're saying that the indigenous peoples are thieves. Well, the justice system should determine that. We are going to fight.
The de facto government's argument for her detention has to do with the transaction she made with her passport. She's accused of attempting to escape, when in reality she was going to participate in meeting with indigenous women from around the world in Mexico.
We had an invitation for the 8th Summit of Indigenous Women of the continent. I have her invitation here with her name.
The ombudsman in La Paz denounced Mrs. Huanca's arrest as illegal.
The ombudsman asks for due process to be respected. That's why we are worried, because there was no arrest warrant for Felipa Huanca.
4 years ago, Mrs. Felipa Huanca denounced those who accused her of participating in the supposed money diversion from the indigenous funds. She denounced how she was practically kidnapped from her home in the city of El Alto.
What kind of government do we have? How was I kidnapped from my house? They didn't even allow me to take my phone or talk to my family, to my lawyers. I am by myself, with no communication. Please, where are women's rights? All the laws that we have. Where is law number 388? What country are we in? I have rights. I have dignity.
The de facto government's method is clear. It uses a prosecutor to arrest people and then interrogates them. It then accuses them, and then a judge orders preventive prison for a period of 6 months while the case is being investigated.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.
On March the 2nd, the people of Guyana will elect their 65 members of parliament for the next 5 years. Telesur will be there to bring you all the news on these key general elections. Our special envoy, Alejandro Kirk, will be covering all the developments of before, during, and after